Welcome to the Hong Kong On Screen podcast, brought to you by Hong Kong On Screen, a Los Angeles-based non-profit organization promoting films and culture of Hong Kong.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Hong Kong On Screen podcast, and today we are very lucky and privileged to have director Lawrence Lau interviewing about his film Spacked Out from the year 2000. Director Lau is a very pivotal figure in Hong Kong cinema since the 1980s, late 1980s. He made his breakthrough through the film Gangs, which is a social realist film about teenage problems. And then later he also made more realist films such as Queen of Temple Street. And he hit it big with the Lee Rock duology starring Andy Lau about the corrupt police force in colonial Hong Kong. After that, he continued to make various films, collaborating sometimes with Johnnie To's Milky Way image, including this film that we're going to talk about, Spacked Out, 無人駕駛, which is another film about teenage delinquency, this time in the districts of Tuen Mun and Mong Kok. It's about a few teenage girls and the problems they have, including unwanted pregnancy and failing grades and all that kind of stuff, and presented through a rather romantic, almost impressionistic style. Yeah, so today we are very grateful to have Director Lau here. Welcome to our podcast.
Thank you.
So my first question for you is, so obviously teenage delinquency is a problem and a topic that you keep returning to, including your first film Gangs and then now in Spacked Out and other films throughout your career. So my question for you is, what keeps drawing you back to this subject matter, and what more do you think you have to say about it every time you make a new film about it?
Well, obviously, the youth problems, it's always there. So in every generation, there are different facets to it. So there's always room to explore the theme. And I think one of the reasons, I have to say that Hong Kong film industry, it's very based on the commercial side. So I think youth gang films like this have like their commercial appeal to most people who are putting up the money. So when they think of a low budget independent film, immediately they would think that, oh, maybe we should do a film about youths and their problem. And when they think about the subject matter, then obviously I'm one of the directors that they would think of, because I've had experiences along this line. So I would say that it's very much down to a very practical level that I end up doing so many useful themes on the delinquents and problems about young people. It's just that obviously it's a more low budget kind of production, but I enjoy doing them because I think I get a lot of energy from doing it, from meeting young people and getting to know how young people through all these years in different generations, what their problems are similar or not. So it's a subject matter that I think you can never stop exploring. And of course, the reason that we end up doing Spacked Out is when Johnnie To again asked me to do a film about youth gangs, my immediate response was that since I've already done one about youth and triads, then I decided that maybe we should try and do one exploring youth problems from the female perspective through young girls. And also because around 2000, the triad problem was no longer as prevalent as before in the 80s and 90s. And so it wasn't a subject that I want to get into, but more on the social problems of how young girls in the suburbs, in the outlying areas of Hong Kong, how they dealing with growing up through because they're not in the center of things. They're not living in the city. So in a sense, they are like a minority. They are like a neglected group. So it's interesting to explore how they would be different from young people who are actually growing up in the metropolitan area.
So yeah, I think you're right that in Hong Kong cinema, at least since the new wave, there is kind of a tradition of the street gang, teenage problem kind of movie. You know, you have your own gangs, you have movies like 靚妹仔 or 三五成群, etc. And I think what struck me as special about Spacked Out is the style of the film is very impressionistic. You're working with a cinematographer like Yu Fai, who has worked on several films by Wong Kar-wai, and it's very kind of poetic kind of style. You have very colorful. You have the camera in strange, unorthodox places. So yeah, can you talk a little bit about how you got the inspiration for this style of the movie instead of a more gritty kind of realist style?
One of the creative people who really helped in deciding on the style of the film is my art director, who decided early on that we should do something that's more like a getting into the consciousness of the girls. So it was real, but in a sense, we want to get deeper into what they were thinking and how they were really emotionally to challenge the situations in which they were put into. And so Wing Kei, which is my art director, she really helped in setting the style. And then, of course, we talked it over with like Yu Fai, and then through his camera work and the lighting, it became more of a straightforward, realistic kind of depiction of the life that these girls were living then, but also through their eyes, they would experience the situations, their life situations. So that's how we decided on doing something that's more heightened and not totally sort of like real life kitchen sink drama.
Yeah, and I think it looks great, it feels great, it makes it more enjoyable and easier to watch. Another thing that struck me about the film is it feels so real and so authentic, all the characters and the situations and the dialogue. And so I'm wondering, what was the shooting style or directing style on set like, and how much of the film was actually scripted and how much of it was just improvised and discovered?
Well, we had a full script when we started production, but like as in gangs, I felt that to really get a naturalistic acting from these inexperienced, the girls, they are not experienced actors, so they don't have any kind of, especially the lead, she's never been in a film before. And so I wanted to get as much as a naturalistic response from them as possible. And so what I did was that I didn't let them read the script. I just, on the day of the film itself, I would tell them about what we were filming and what the situation of the scene was like. And then they would sort of improvise their dialogue, not so much their action, because of course we have to stick to the storyline. So we sort of give them the gist of the scene, and then they would through their own, I mean, that they've sort of experienced some of the things that we were dramatizing in the film anyway. So they would immediately get what we were trying to portray, and so they just use their own words to being character, and that's how we did most of the film. We also when we were writing the script, we were also doing the casting at the same time. and a lot of the what's in the script were actual material that we got from talking to these girls, from our research with various young people that came to the casting. So in a way, they were co-authoring or helping write their scripts, and the script, in a sense, was tailor-made for them, so they didn't have any problem improvising on set.
I see. Yeah. On a similar note to that, I was gonna ask about, so these actors, these teenage actors, are actually, they're basically child actors. They're so incredibly convincing. It doesn't even feel like they're acting. It feels like they're just being. So I'm wondering, where did you find them, and what was it like working with them?
Well, obviously, we had various ways of. We had calls, casting calls, and then some of these 茄喱啡公司, the
Extras
extras casting, they would help because they are familiar with getting no-name actors, and so they have this method of just casting their net around the particular area that we asked them specifically to find people from Tuen Mun, and so they got us a lot of young people from Tuen Mun. That was one way, and another was my assistant directors were going out to various places, like where they would hang out, sometimes even in front of schools when they come out, and then he'll just go up to them and start talking to them. It was various methods, and so it wasn't just one way, and we just cast a wide net, and I think the whole process took about 3 or 4 months, and then at the same time we were writing the script as well. And I think the script writers, they also met with some of these girls, and they actually went out to Tuen Mun and did a lot of research on their own as well. And so it was everybody sort of like chipped in helping out in doing the research and doing the casting.
Yeah, adding on to that, throughout your career, you've worked with some of the biggest stars in Hong Kong cinema, such as Andy Lau, Tony Leung, Leslie Cheung, and then you've also worked with unknown non-actors, like in this film, Spacked Out. And I'm wondering, how do you direct them differently? And if you can answer me, like, do you prefer working with big name actors or unknown actors like them?
Well, it's different. So I enjoy working with inexperienced actors because they like a piece of white paper that you can sort of mold them. They don't come with any kind of method in acting. I think the key to directing these inexperienced actors is actually in the casting process itself. If you find the right people for the right characters for the script, then you don't have any problem in directing them on set, because they'll just be of course they have to be natural in front of the camera, but if they have no problem about that, then they just basically they're directing themselves. You don't need to do much. You don't need to coddle them or anything. You just have to tell them what you want, and in a way it's like it's you're working together to mold the scene, and I think I'm enjoying that, because it's like it's a creative process. It's like doing something together, and you're not just being somebody who's up there and just demanding everything to be along a certain line. It's sort of more fluid. That's what I enjoy about directing young, inexperienced actors. With stars, of course, again, I think it's also about casting the right people in the role. of course, you'll meet with them before the production starts. You go over the script and you talk to them about the character. And you know, that depends on the actor. Sometimes they have a lot of questions and sometimes they don't. And I think a lot of times, if you have enough preparation before shooting, then on set, you just basically you do a couple of rehearsals and then they know where the camera is and then you're there. So I think it's the casting. I think I've always believed in having the right people for the right role, and that because when it's done right, the director doesn't really have to do much on set.
Actually, about that, the question that just came to my head is, did you do any rehearsals with these young actors, or did you just go on set and just
No, never, because that's the whole point of it. If you want to be as natural as possible, you want to get them, you know, when they're most fresh. You don't want them to rehearse it so much that it becomes, you know, like too much. It becomes more unnatural when it's rehearsed. So I try to avoid, unless there are certain camera movements that demands that. Otherwise, I don't do any rehearsals. I try not to.
Yeah, speaking of big names, I think one that surprised me and probably other people is Johnnie To. You know, he's famous for making very gritty, violent crime dramas or very crowd-pleasing rom-coms, and this is neither one of those, and it's a very surprising film on his filmography, I think. So my question is, what was like working with him, and how much did he actually participate as a producer of this film?
Well, once he approves of the subject matter, and then he pretty much gives us a free hand in developing the script. Of course, we would talk to him about the development of it, and then I'll meet with him now and then, tell him, you know, how things were going. He will give his opinion, but he doesn't really involve himself too much in the whole creative process. He pretty much gives us a free hand, and then, well, after the script is approved, then again, it's the whole production. He just leaves it to the production manager, and then if it's not over budget, then he pretty much leaves us, you know, to our own device. And then he's a very good, to me, a very good producer, because he really believes in giving a creative free hand to directors.
Yeah, that's great. I guess another question I have for you is, you know, from reading your biography, you probably had a quite different adolescence from these people depicted on screen. You know, you went to DBS, which is one of the more prestigious schools in Hong Kong, and you didn't, I don't know if you grew up in Tuen Mun, but you probably didn't. And so I'm wondering, how did your own adolescence and teenage years inform your making of this film?
Well, obviously, I'm from a different milieu from these young people, and I only started getting into social problems like this when I was working at RTHK, Radio Television Hong Kong, and we were doing a lot of programs about you know, on the social problems of Hong Kong, that I got into, you know, dealing with social issues. Much of it is it's really just doing research and getting to meet people and finding the right people who would get you to meet people from outside your own circle. And I was lucky in that I've met quite a few people, like social workers or people who are dealing with youth problems, that they were very helpful in getting me to understand what they were dealing with, and getting to actually meeting and talking to these young people. So I think that it's because I'm sort of like an outsider, then I can take more of a objective view that helps me to explore these subject matters. I don't know. sometimes if you get too close to something, you don't feel that there's anything to it. But when you're you sort of like standing a little back from it, being an observer, then there are things that you find maybe people who's actually inside that circle would find common or not so particularly special, or but for us it's something that's worthy of exploring.
Here's a question that I see a lot of people online say. I don't know if you're familiar with the new social media platform called Letterbox. It's like a website where a lot of young people who watch films can write reviews. And one of the questions that I see the most is, what does Spacked Out actually mean? A lot of people think, is it just a typo of spaced out, or because it's not a word in English? So I'm wondering, where did the title come from?
Well, actually, the title came from one of our co-workers. He was also educated in North America, in the States, and he thought that the title needs to be something that's not immediately makes sense, or even doesn't have to make sense, because it's sort of like something that's you can make whatever you want out of it. Spaced out, or it means, I guess it gives you more sort of 想象空间, a way to interpret it, of what it actually means. So basically, I don't think it means anything, and it can mean anything that you want it to be.
I see. Yeah. My last question is, I think in recent years we've seen a lot of distributors, especially North American or English speaking distributors, re-release and restore Hong Kong films, including your own. And I'm wondering, what was it like when you got the call that someone wants to, re-release Spacked Out, which is, I think, remains one of the more obscure films of her career, and what is it like revisiting the film 20 years later?
Well, obviously, happy and glad that finally, at least people of the different generation would get to see what young people in the year 2000 were going through. So I think it's a slice of life that I'm happy that people would get. A lot of actually young people have come up to me and say, "Oh, I was also growing up around that time, and it really brings up a lot of memories, or good or bad, of that time and place." And I'm happy that film had served its purpose in preserving something from that era. And as for me, watching the film again, obviously, like most directors, you can only see the flaws of the film. But I think much of it still holds up. I'm just glad that it doesn't seem to be too out. Still quite
young and modern.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm glad that Pearl and Kanye releasing is doing such a good job of letting people be able to see this film again. Yeah, after all the years.
Speaking of preserving the scenes of the film, like, I think what struck me was so much of it looked so contemporary, like it could have been shot today. And I think a lot of the youth culture is still similar, but a main difference that I noticed was you shot a lot of scenes of the city and there were so many neon signs, and nowadays it's almost all demolished. And yeah, it's like a precious record of what Hong Kong looked like just 20 years ago. So yeah. Do you have any more to share to our audiences, Director Lau?
No, I hope they enjoy the film, and yeah.
Yeah, I think they certainly will. I think it's very underrated and very similar to a lot of kind of North American films of that era as well, but just, unfortunately obscure and buried. And I'm very glad that it's being re-released and hopefully more people will get to see it. So Spacked Out is going to be released through Candy Releasing, our distributor, at the Metrograph Cinema in New York, and it will be coming to other major North American cities in the next few months. So thank you, Director Lau, very much for the interview today, and thank you to Candy Releasing, and also releasing the film on Blu-ray through OCN Releasing, available on the Vinegar Syndrome's website. So thank you very much for the interview today, and I hope you all have a great holiday season.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.